Okay, Saul,
Okay, how are
welcome
you?
to the show. Thanks for
Thank you.
coming on. I'm great. How are you?
Good, good. Looking forward.
Good. So you are a New York lawyer. You are a
Yes,
defense attorney currently.
yes.
And how long have you been practicing law for?
35 years.
35 years and always in New York?
I'm admitted in Florida also. I did that maybe 10 years ago. I haven't really I mean, I've had like two cases in Florida, but I did it in case I ever want to retire. I just want to be able to do something and not retire.
Yeah, no, it'll be the classic Florida retiree.
Exactly,
Maybe handle
exactly.
some cases for the
I
elderly.
I would go down and visit my parents. I'm like, what do you do a whole day? Oh, nothing. I'm like, yeah, I don't think I could do that.
Yeah. Were your parents in law or what set you on the
No,
track to be a
no,
lawyer?
no. It's easy. I wanted to be an actor, and I just realized that there's a lot of out of work actors in Los Angeles, and I could act in front of a jury instead. So
Yeah.
just naturally went into law.
Yeah. And you started out as a prosecutor, correct?
Yeah, I was in the Manhattan DA's office, New York County District Attorney's office. When I met Robin Morgenthau, who was the head of the district attorney's office, he was the district attorney, obviously. He said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to try cases." He says, "All right, I'm going to put you in special narcotics because New York had such a huge drug problem." And he was said, "If you don't get a trial within a week of working here, come see me." The second day I was there, they said, "Here, try this case." Straight out of law school, tried my first case. It was great.
Yeah. So that would have been how old of a man would you have been at that time thrown
So
into
it was,
this?
so that was in 1990 when I graduated. And I was born in '65, so
Yeah. Well, there you go. So that would have
yeah,
been quite an experience. I mean, it was your hometown. You probably knew the feel of the town and kind of what you're getting yourself into. What was it like starting out in the narcotics division? Was it a big eye opener
it,
or how
you know,
was it?
I obviously knew there was a huge drug problem in New York City, and it was a huge eye opener. It really was. I didn't realize how big it was and how many arrests were being made a day, and in New York, you have to go into the grand jury and get an indictment for felony cases. So I was able to present maybe 20 cases a day. They're very quick presentations. You would put an undercover officer on. He would testify, that he went out, he bought drugs from this person, he took it, had it tested, it's drugs. The whole thing could take 7 minutes at most.
Hmm.
And you would just constantly be in the grand jury. And, there was fights between the district attorneys, like who's going to get in, who's going to get grand jury time. It was very, there's only four grand juries going on at a time in New York County at that time in narcotics. And we would like, wait online to get into the grand jury to indict our cases.
So you're appointed by the state to prosecute. Is that how that worked?
Yeah, you're appointed by the county, actually. It's New York
Okay.
County. And you're working for the city, for the county, and the state. It's all at the same time. But the state prosecutors in New York are known as the assistant attorney general, whereas a New York City prosecutor is an assistant district attorney. So there is a little
Yeah.
bit of a difference.
Yeah. So you were a lot of probably small crime, a lot of probably crack cases and small drugs and small time drug dealers to start
Well,
or
you start off with a real easy case. It was called an undercover buy and bust with PRBM. PRBM
yeah.
is pre-recorded buy money. So it was
Yeah.
basically an undercover going, buying drugs, giving them a $10 bill that they knew the serial number of, then
Hmm.
walking away and having the uniform team come in, arrest the person, find more drugs on the person, which mean that it was an undercover buy and bust PRBM with stash. So he has more drugs to
Hmm.
sell, and then find the $10 bill. And they were like, okay, we know that this $10 bill came from our undercover. You have it. You obviously sold him drugs. Why else would you have the $10 bill from him? So it
And then
was
off
real.
to jail he goes.
Well, he gets arrested, spends a couple of 24 hours in jail, gets arraigned. Most people got bail at that time. And then off to jail he would go if I would win the case or if he would not take a plea. But
Yeah.
New York County was playing down a lot of cases because there were just too many cases to go to trial at the time.
Yeah. So would those have been serious felony offenses though, the drug charges if convicted?
Yeah, it's a C felony on a
Mhm.
sale at that time. You could be facing 15 years in jail. Most people did not get 15 years in jail.
Mhm.
If it was your first arrest, you're probably getting probation. If it's your second arrest, we call it a bullet. You get 1 year.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
take a bullet.
So you started earning your stripes doing this. Did you enjoy that day to day, or did it get monotonous and tiresome after a while?
So it got monotonous and tiresome just doing drug cases. So I
Yeah.
went back to the boss, to Robert Morgenthau, and I said, this is great, and I'm doing a great job, and I have 100% conviction record. Can you give me something more challenging? He's like, okay, no problem. By the time you get back to your office, you'll have another trial on your desk. And he gave
Mhm.
me the most complicated ATM robbery I've ever seen.
Okay.
Um, and I prepared the witnesses, and I was ready for trial. And I walked in there, and it was the first trial I ever lost.
Yeah.
The picture that the ATM came out with did not look like the defendant, and I kept asking my detectives, I'm like, why do you think it's him? Like, the picture doesn't look like him. They're like, no, it's definitely him. We have an eyewitness, and they found the eyewitness. And the eyewitness says it's him, but the picture doesn't look like him. And the defense is going to show this picture to the jury, and they're like, it's him, it's him, it's him, it's him. And sure enough, I lost the case. Um, and to this day, I don't know if it's him or not, quite frankly. But
Yeah.
there was enough evidence to go forward with the case, and the detectives were sure of it, and the eyewitness was sure of it. Um, and we went forward with the case. But it was the only case I ever lost when I
Yeah.
asked to get out of drugs. They gave me a bank robbery case.
Well, I imagine ATM footage in the 90s was crystal clear. I mean, they can't
Yeah,
even get clear footage today.
right. It was terrible. The footage was terrible. Didn't look
Yeah.
like anyone. It looked like a Martian, quite frankly. I was like, I don't
Yeah.
know who this person is, but it's not. I don't think it's this guy.
Yeah. So that probably made you shake your head and humbled yourself a little bit and be like, this isn't, it might seem like a stupid thing, but this guy maybe went to jail. Nobody knows if it was actually him at the end of the day. So what happened from there?
Well,
You're
he didn't go to jail. It was a not guilty
okay.
verdict. He went to trial. He went to
Oh, he went to
trial.
trial
He
and
went to
got not
trial. It
guilty.
was not guilty. It was my first loss. Very humbling
Mm-hmm.
experience for me that it was a loss.
Right.
But I'm glad that the system worked. I'm glad that it worked. One of the hardest cases I ever did was, it was a 10-pound marijuana case, and that's felony weight in marijuana terms.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, it's a marijuana case. Like, come on, guys, we're really prosecuting this? And they're like looking at me like, it's 10 pounds, Saul. Yes, prosecute the damn case. So
Yeah.
I went ahead. I begging the guy to take a plea. I really wanted him to take a plea. He didn't want to take a plea. I was making offers, like, crazy offers. He didn't want to take the plea. I think his lawyer saw it as a weakness on my part. I'm like, it's not a weakness on my part. I really don't want to see him go to jail for that long. And sure
Mm-hmm.
enough, I got a conviction um, on a 10-pound case. It's a B felony at that weight. And he was facing a huge jail time. And I remember at sentencing, he had one request: can I hug my son goodbye? Because he wasn't going to see his son for a long time. And here comes a 7-year-old boy, in the courtroom, and they were very nice to let him hug his son goodbye. And it's heartbreaking. And but that was my job, and I had to be a prosecutor, and I had to prosecute the case. And he went to jail for a long time for it.
Yeah, so that's a big thing. I always wondered when you're reaching out to his attorney and trying to strike a deal, for a vague term for it. I always wondered how that happens. What are those conversations like? How much of it is maybe skirting the law almost? Like, okay, like it just seems like some of those deals could be, by lack of a better term, greasy sometimes, like we'll let this guy off or we're going to throw the book at him. How much is it to the letter of the law? In your experience, what have you seen any, like, to the corruption extent there play out, or like
I,
what
I've,
is
I've
that experience
I've
like?
never seen the corruption extent. I mean, in plea
Yeah.
bargaining, and that's what it's called. It's called plea bargaining. Is first of all, there's guidelines to it. You can't go
Mm-hmm.
from a felony to a misdemeanor unless you're going to
Mm-hmm.
withdraw the case from the grand jury. Okay. You can't go more than 2 levels down. So if it's a B felony, you can only go down to the D felony. But if it's a C felony, you go down to an E felony.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain guidelines where you could, rule out, that it's not really playing games here. It's basically giving the best offer you possibly can. And
Mm-hmm.
certainly, if the case is weak on the prosecution end, if the witnesses are hesitant to come testify, if they might not make the great witnesses, we don't get to choose our witnesses, obviously. I can't put on,
Right.
priests, nuns, and rabbis, and as witnesses. You put on the witness who was there, and sometimes those people have criminal records.
Mm-hmm.
So you do have witnesses that are weak, that might have a problem with their credibility, and you'll make a better offer.
Mm-hmm.
It happens. Um, it's not a sign that you want the case to go away. There's a lot of reasons that district attorneys and U.S. attorneys make offers. A lot of it has to do with the case flow. There are so many cases that are going to trial. We can't possibly try all the cases at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to please some of them out. So some of them are getting better deals than others based on what your case flow is like that. I don't think that's an unfair per se advantage that either side has. I think it's just reality of the system. Um, when I first went to the district attorney's office, there was a suggestion box. My suggestion was keep the courts open 24/7. Like, why not?
Mm-hmm.
Instead
Yeah.
of just having night court for arraignments, have trials at night. You'll get a whole different set of jurors. You get jurors who are night owls. You'll get a whole different set of attorneys who like to work at night. Why not keep it? Why only have it 9 to 5? And by the way, it was worse than 9 to 5 because the court officers are union employees, and the union says,
Mm-hmm.
you get a 15-minute break here, you get a 15-minute break here, you get an hour for lunch, you must leave at 5 o'clock, you get 10 minutes to change into your uniform, 10 minutes to change out of your uniform. By the time all that union stuff is taken care of, and God bless the union and God bless the court officers, we can't do it without them, but you only
Mm-hmm.
have maybe 6 hours of real court time in a day.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Yeah. Not efficient, especially with the volume. I mean, a place like New York City, especially at
Right.
that time and today, a lot of volume. So, as a prosecutor, when you're supposed to prosecute and you feel like you have a weak case to prosecute, and obviously lawyers are very much focused on their success rate. I mean, you can get a higher, increase your rate over time, be a more widely sought after lawyer because you can have that as a high success rate means you're a better lawyer. But what if you're dealing with weak cases, or do you get to choose your cases? How is that navigated?
Well, I mean, depending on the office and depending on what bureau you're in, you actually do get to choose your cases because you get to choose to
Mm-hmm.
bring the case or not bring the case. In New York, it's something called ECAB, which is Early Case Assessment Bureau. So if I got a case coming into me at ECAB and I thought that this was not going to be a proper case, that the arrest wasn't made correctly, I would do something called DP the case, which is decline to prosecute the case.
Mm.
You basically tell the officer, this is very nice, go find the person in the jail system and let them out. Walk them out the front door
Okay.
and say, I'm sorry, I'm DPing the case. So you do get to choose your cases that way. Now, let's say somebody else did not DP a case that is weak. Prosecutors have two ways of getting out of this. The real way, which should be done, the justice system way, is to walk into court and say, we're moving to dismiss the case. We don't have enough evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. The other way is the weakling way, I always call it, and that's what's called 30-30. A case has to be prosecuted within a certain amount of time. So if you keep delaying the case and say you're not ready, the case will automatically get dismissed based on a time issue. But the truth is, if there was a case that was weak and I was a prosecutor, I would just walk in the court and say, there's not enough evidence to prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt. People are going to move to dismiss. I'd put a memo into the file why I felt that way, and I dismiss cases that I felt were weak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So how long did you serve on the prosecution side of the narcotics division, I guess?
It's a 3-year commitment. I did 3 years and 3 months.
And then where did you head to from there?
So then I went to a private firm who did a medical malpractice defense. It was called Barrow and Gardner at the time. It was fantastic. Um, I, I got a great education in medicine. It's like going to medical school without going to medical school, because every case you have to learn the medicine behind the case, then hire experts and understand how you're going to defend the case. And I spent a little bit more than a year there. And the only reason I left was because Barrow and Gardner went bankrupt. It happens. So
Yeah.
everyone needed to find a job. And then I decided I never, ever want to be in a position where I could be told you don't have a job the next day for whatever reason. So I opened up my own firm.
Yep.
And
So solo, was that
so I had
under your own name?
I had a partner originally, but then
Yeah.
we separated and we each went our own separate ways, and I became a solo practitioner.
Yeah.
I never looked back, and I enjoy every second of it.
So in the medical,
Malpractice
I guess that
defense.
malpractice, that would be private clinicians and private doctors, or do you go after the drug companies sometimes as well?
No, it's
for
it's doctors and hospitals. It was
doctors and
doctors and
hospitals?
hospitals, defending doctors and hospitals, who were, brought up on a malpractice case. It's a civil case, obviously, and you have to know the medicine, and you have to know the doctor, and you have to know the personalities of the people in the hospital. Um, and we've tried cases. I had some very complicated trials when I worked there. I got defense verdicts in all of them because
Hmm.
when you have a case where there really is malpractice, you end up settling anyway because you can't trust the
Hmm.
jury. So hopefully you settle a case. There's insurance that covers it, and if it's a strong case, we take it to trial.
Well, that was my next question. Is the insurance companies probably fight pretty hard to cover these? Or I guess the doctors want to use the insurance to fight pretty hard. It could probably get quite expensive on the doctor's side of things, and very laborious on your side. I can just imagine before you take a case, how much research would have to go in behind the scenes before you even choose to take the cases. Would that be correct? Or
No, well, a firm like Baron Gardner worked for the insurance company. So,
oh, okay.
so a doctor or a hospital would be sued. They would get a complaint, and they would send it to their insurance company, and the insurance company would then farm it out to the different attorneys that they had working for them. And it's
Mm,
interesting you mentioned about insurance companies because not every doctor has the opportunity to say, "Don't settle this case. I did nothing wrong."
mm-hmm,
In order to have that opportunity, you have to buy something called a consent policy. So the doctor
mm-hmm,
actually pays a little bit more money to be able to say, yes, settle the case, or no, don't settle the case. They buy what's called a consent policy. Most
mm-hmm,
doctors that I worked with did not have a consent policy, and therefore the insurance companies were the one to say, we don't want to take this risk. Even though you might have a strong case, we don't want to take this risk if you could settle it for X amount of dollars. And I found
mm-hmm,
that very interesting that, I was essentially working financially for the insurance company, but legally I was representing a doctor or a hospital.
mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're on the defense side here then of the
Right.
doctor. Yeah.
Yes.
So which is an interesting stance. Yeah. So and you had mostly successful defenses there. Is it very difficult on the patient side to make a malpractice suit stick?
Um, malpractice on the plaintiff side
Mm-hmm.
is a real specialty of the law. Not every attorney could go ahead and do it. First of all, you need a lot of money to do it because you need to pay for the experts. You need to have an expert review, and you need to have a great education in medicine as well. Not
Mm-hmm.
every bad result is a result of malpractice. There are certain risks of the procedure when people go in for surgery or whatever it is, and there are certain, there, everything could have been done perfectly well, but you get a bad result.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to take that into account as well. So in terms of on the plaintiff side, I did a couple of malpractice cases, medical malpractice cases when I went out on my own. Again, success. But I knew the medicine beforehand. A client
Mm-hmm.
would come in, I would take the medical records, gather the medical records, send them over to an expert, sit down with my expert, and say, okay, is there malpractice or not? And sometimes there wasn't, and I would go back to the client and say, I'm sorry, I can't take your case.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's the bottom line.
Yeah. So just over a year you did that, and your reason for leaving that side of law or the
Well, the
medical
reason I
side?
went to in terms of medical, I love criminal defense so much.
Okay.
I
So you missed
just
the criminal world, yeah.
I missed the criminal world
Yeah.
exactly.
So now
I
you transition into a criminal defense attorney?
correct, correct. I mean,
Right.
I've always done. When I first went on my own, I was joking with people. I said I would do rent law. They say, "Oh, you're doing
Mhm.
landlord tenant work?" I said, "No, I'm doing rent law. Whatever pays the rent, I'm going to do."
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That makes sense.
You want
So
me to write
your
a will?
favorite,
I'll write a will. Whatever pays the rent, I don't care.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's a great way to start out and a good way to get diverse experience, I guess you could say.
Exactly.
So you didn't want to go back to the prosecution side. Was there a reason why you preferred defense?
Pays better.
Pays
Let's be
better.
honest. Pays much better.
Yeah, yeah.
If I could be a lifetime prosecutor and not have to worry about paying my bills, I would much prefer to be a lifetime prosecutor. It's the most
Right.
rewarding profession there is out there.
Right.
I really enjoyed it, and I love the experience I had at the DA's office. I have a tremendous amount of respect for prosecutors. They're not getting the big bucks, no question about it,
Mm-hmm.
and they're doing a great job of it. And they're serious people who take their job very seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And for the most part, as a prosecutor, The idea is to do justice. And when you see that a
Hmm.
prosecutor really is there just to do justice, not to get a win, that's somebody who should be honored and respected. As a
Hmm.
defense attorney, my job is to get a win. There's no question about it. I'm not, I'm there to make sure that my client doesn't go to jail or doesn't even get
Yeah,
accused, doesn't get arrested, whatever stage I get the
right.
case.
How do you separate the job from your moral ethics? Because I am sure you have defended some reprehensible people. The beauty of our system is everybody gets a chance at defense, and we have to uphold that. And it takes lawyers to do that. And some people want to throw fire at lawyers for defending some of these people that do horrific things, but they need the right to defense.
Yeah.
Everybody does. So how do you separate that when you're sitting with a client that it can be any kind of crime? Like, I know you've done some sexual abuse cases and things of that nature. It's probably not some favorable people in the room with you, but you have to defend them.
Right.
How do you separate the two?
Great question. So, first of all, in my mind, I am defending the United States Constitution. I'm not
Hmm.
defending this particular individual. I'm defending the Constitution. The Constitution has given us certain rights. The Constitution has set up certain guidelines and how to prosecute somebody. And I want to make sure that those guidelines are followed and that my client's rights were upheld and properly preserved. Okay, that's number
Hmm.
one. Number two is I am defending an individual as well. Now,
Hmm.
the world might see this person as the most horrible monster there is. Person is accused of touching a young girl, let's say. Okay, horrible crime, and I understand the public perception of it. But when I talk to the individual and I talk to this one person, I always find at least one redeeming quality in the person. Always, no matter what they're accused of. Humans always have a redeeming quality that I could just hone in on. And I'm like, wow, this person is a good person. This person may have made a terrible mistake, but this person has a good quality to them. And I could hone in on that good quality and I blow it up, so to speak, and I see it. And when I see the person, I'm always seeing that good quality in the person. And it's usually more than one good quality. Let's face it, people have more than one good quality, even if they've done something bad. And I could go ahead and I could defend it. I don't see it as a moral issue. I see it
Hmm.
as a human issue. Um, I could I could separate the morality of defending a crime from defending a person. And I'm defending a person. I can't defend sexual abuse against a child. No one can. It's a horrible
Hmm.
crime. But I could defend a person accused of it.
Hmm. So I guess in a very incriminating, strong case against the person you're defending, you're just trying to reduce the sentence, or maybe get them out of. I don't. Yeah, you guys don't have the death penalty there. I don't believe you do in New York, but like, you're trying to get them maybe down from a life sentence to maybe 20 years with a chance of parole, or you're not trying to get the guy off, but you're just definitely trying to mitigate damage to that client who is in fact guilty. Like, it's just obvious, or what's your
Well,
strategy?
well, certainly if I can get the person off, I want to get the person off.
Yeah.
So if the government, used tactics that were illegal, if it was an illegal search, if it was an illegal wiretap, if it was illegal surveillance against my client, and that's the only evidence they have, and they weren't allowed to use that, I certainly will make a motion and have a hearing to have a judge determine whether it's illegal or not. Um,
Hmm.
if all the evidence is against my client and there's nothing that I could do about it, then yes, of course, you'll try to make the best deal possible and you'll try to convince a judge that your client is worth saving and have the least amount
Hmm.
of time possible.
Hmm.
But you know there's always a plan B. Let's put it that way. That's the plan B.
Yeah.
The plan A is to get the case dismissed. That's always
Hmm.
the plan A.
Yeah, and that would be obviously, if you have something where it was illegally obtained, even though it's just, say, blatant video evidence, just to be extreme, it's still, you still have to separate into, it's my job to go after that as a defense attorney,
Uh,
even though morally I don't want to, but I have to uphold the law and respect this person's rights.
right.
That for a lot of people would be very difficult to maintain professionalism in a situation like that.
I hear
But
that,
it's your job. Yeah.
but it's not just my job. It's what the United States Constitution allows me to do and tells me to
Yeah.
do and insists
Yeah.
that I do. And not just insist that I do it, insist that I do it very well. Because if I don't do it
Yeah.
well, by the way, then my client will make a motion for ineffective assistance of counsel and maybe get out because of that, because I didn't do a good job.
Yeah.
So the government wants me to do the best job possible for the client to make sure that later on it
Yeah.
doesn't get appealed on ineffective assistance of counsel.
Yeah. I think that's a perspective that a lot of people probably need to hear, because people watch the news and hear these stories and, they just think the lawyers are just a bad person, but they actually need to hear that this is why the lawyer does it. And the lawyer has to do it because of the Constitution. We're lucky in the States. I'm in Canada, but in the United States, you guys have the Constitution because it protects all citizens. So it's an important quality to have.
Yeah.
So you've been doing that line of work, criminal defense, for the vast majority of your career, then, you'd say?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. And any cases that anybody would recognize, or can you even speak to cases that are done in rap that might have been on TV?
I mean, there were a couple. I don't really want to hone in on them. If everyone wants to Google me, they can Google me and find out what cases I've done. But I always tell people that if your name doesn't get out in the public, and your name doesn't get on a website, and your name doesn't get on Instagram, I've done a good job. It's avoiding the arrest and avoiding the prosecution that I really try to specialize in. And that means come to me early. Come to me, as soon as you think that you're going to be accused of something, before you even get in touch with somebody. So because I'll tell you a recent case. Somebody came to me and he said that his therapist reported him to the police. Now, therapists in America are mandated reporters. So if you've committed a crime against a child, they have to report you to the police. And he came to me first after his therapist told him that he's a mandated reporter and he's going to report him. And I instructed him, I said, okay, the police are going to come and talk to you. Don't say a word except I have a lawyer. My lawyer's name is Saul Bienefeld. Go call him. Once the officer heard that, the detective heard that, he wasn't allowed to question him anymore. And he didn't question him. I then had my client write an email to the therapist saying, okay, you reported me once, but now I'm telling you, I'm preserving my HIPAA rights, which is there's Health Information Protection Act, that, that's it. It's done once. When the detective went to talk to the therapist said, I did the report. Look at the report. I'm not talking about it anymore. That's been 2 months already. He hasn't been arrested. There's not a lot of evidence there to go against this person. And it's because he came to me early and he got very good advice early on, and the police were not able to question him because he had a lawyer. Once you invoke your right to counsel in America, they're not allowed to question you at all. And I would say about 95% of the law enforcement actually honors that. And it's nice to see when they do honor it. Unfortunately, there are 5% that say, oh, what do you need a lawyer for? Come on, talk to me. Why are you spending so much money? We can get this over with. And they're just trying to trick you into making a statement that goes against you. But most law enforcement in this country are honest about it and stop questioning it immediately when they hear that someone has a lawyer. So that's good. And there are plenty of other cases where evidence was taken illegally. The search wasn't good, and I went ahead and I had the search suppressed. I used to do drunk driving cases. It's a subspecialty of mine because I understand the science and the medicine behind it, so to speak. And I knew that, the way that the police officers set up this stop, a DWI stop, driving while intoxicated stop, was not based on the Constitution, and it was not based on police protocol. I knew that there was a mistake on it early on in the case, and they went ahead and put all that paperwork in with the mistake in it. And then we had a hearing, and the judge basically said, yeah, this is not a proper constitutional stop. I got to let him go, whether he was drunk or not. And, you win a case that way as well. But you have to really be an expert in the law. You can't just, dilly-dally in this stuff. You have to understand it really well and know the rules behind it in order to spot something like that.
Have you ever been in the situation where you've gotten somebody off, say on a technicality or just weak evidence, and they've reoffended and were guilty?
Repeat clients are my favorite.
Yeah, you're a classic lawyer. No, just kidding.
So the answer is unfortunately yes. People sometimes don't learn their lesson. It's unfortunate, and by the way, they don't become repeat clients because they're sometimes too embarrassed to even come back to you and say, I got caught again.
Hmm.
But yes, it does happen. It happens mostly in white collar cases. Somebody commits fraud, I would get them off. 2 years later, they get arrested again for committing almost the exact same fraud, just in a
Yeah.
different state.
Maybe almost likely to reoffend because they got a level of confidence and they think they can just phone you and then they're just on the beach a month later. Life's good.
Well, I don't think it's that way, but I think that
No.
there are people just born fraudsters, and it's in their blood. They can't help it.
Yeah. So with the rise of technology over your career, how much more, I guess, easier or difficult has that made your career as a lawyer? Or not AI, but I guess social media, cameras, phones everywhere.
Yeah.
How has that changed the landscape?
Well, it cuts both ways. The police are now using AI to determine where they should patrol, where there are high crime areas, which means that crime is happening in low crime areas because there are no police around.
Mm,
And at the same token, AI could be great in terms of forgeries, determine if something is a forgery, to determine if something is authentic or not, um, to determine the amount of time it takes to drive from one place to another at a certain time during the day. You could put that question into ChatGPT, and like to the second, it's going to get it right.
mm-hmm,
And it's just very interesting how all that works, and all that stuff could be used both for the defense and the prosecution. So it definitely cuts both ways. I'm definitely using it. I'm using it responsibly, obviously, and it's exciting on the investigation part. It's also
mm-hmm,
exciting on the research part. In terms of asking Lexis or Westlaw AI a question and getting instantly 10 cases that are on point around the country. It's fantastic.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess the case law would be big. Um, well, with I guess that the AI side of things is actual AI. You can't take a paragraph out of Chat GPT and put that in front of a judge and say, "See, AI told me this, so it has to be true." It's not, I guess, in on its face admissible in court. Would it be?
Admissible, it actually gets attorneys in big trouble when they do that, because
Right.
unfortunately
Right.
it happens, and they get into huge trouble when it happens.
Yeah.
There were cases, and I've seen them. It's sometimes laughable, but it's also scary to see an attorney go in front of an appellate court, 3-judge panel, and they're asking him, this case that you cited, we couldn't find it. Like, where did you get it from? And he's like, oh, my assistant got it for me. Who's your assistant? ChatGPT. Like, it doesn't exist. ChatGPT hallucinated, made this up,
Yeah.
and the case doesn't exist, and the lawyer gets into a huge amount of trouble for it. You have to
Oh.
double and triple check everything that anything in AI tells you to do.
Yeah, that's the reference I heard as a case law reference by a lawyer too, where they just got thrown out because you just look, like you said, you look like an idiot and you look like a lazy lawyer. And unfortunately, people are becoming lawyers now using AI, I imagine. Back in
Yeah.
the day, it was not so easy. But have you had any experience with corruption in New York City in the lawyer industry, like just the police, from police to lawyers to anybody, DAs?
So, fortunately, I have not experienced corruption. I mean, I
That's
know
good to
about it,
hear.
and I've seen other attorneys who have been through it. But in my career so far, there has not been corruption. I've dealt with some very above board, honest people, even to the
Yeah.
point where, if the government made a mistake, the government comes clean about it and says, we made a mistake,
Yeah.
and, we need to correct it. We'll suffer the consequences if we have to.
Yeah.
And I'm very pleased to say that, at least dealing in New York with the U.S. Attorney's Office in both the Eastern District and the Southern District, extremely honest, extremely ethical prosecutors
Hmm.
there. Every once in a while you get an FBI agent or Homeland Security investigation agent who, is on the fence type of sake. They're
Hmm.
not
Hmm.
quite corrupt, but they could have done things better. I'll give you a great example. I have a case where somebody was leaving the country. When you leave the country, your phone is actually subject to a search. Okay. The government is allowed to search your phone. They're allowed to search it for contraband, and child pornography is contraband. So here's a Homeland Security officer pulling somebody over and says, I want to search your phone. What's your password? The client gave the password willingly, um, searches the phone and doesn't find anything on the phone, but takes the phone anyway back to the lab to do a more intense forensic search of the phone to really get into the guts of the phone. When I found out about it, I immediately, within an hour of this happening, wrote him an email saying, if you're going to do that, fine, but get a search warrant first. And he didn't get a search warrant. So, in my opinion, that's skirting the law. In the judge's
Mm-hmm.
opinion, because this already went to hearing, nothing happened, no harm, no foul. He doesn't have to listen to a defense attorney who tells him to get a search warrant. We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
We'll see what the Supreme Court says about this later on. But that's where we are now. But I would think that an agent who really wants to follow the law, and when he gets an email like this, get a search warrant, will at least speak to the U.S. attorney and say, "Hey, there's a defense attorney asking for a search warrant. Do I need one or not?" He didn't even do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
Nobody's knocked on your door and made you an offer you can't refuse.
no,
Yeah.
no,
No, that's good.
that
Um,
has not happened.
and you've taken cases to the Supreme Court, I imagine, over your career. They've gone
Well,
that far.
I'm admitted in the Supreme Court, but unfortunately I haven't had the great opportunity to argue in front of the Supreme Court. Still looking forward to that day. I'm still young enough that I can.
Oh
But
yeah, you
that
plan on doing this for a long time, I
I plan on
imagine.
doing it for a long time, and I hope to be able to argue in front of the Supreme Court. It's very exciting, and it's
Yeah.
very different type of law that anyone practices. And I urge anyone who's in Washington D.C. when the Supreme Court is in session to go watch an argument, watch an oral argument. It's
Mm-hmm.
the most fascinating thing. You have to wait online. It's like going to a rock concert, but it's really a very fascinating thing to watch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's funny how you watch lawyers and they, from the very opening questions, I guess, when they do the questioning of people on the stand, they're very nice, very polite, and they're just kind of a lot of cases that I've seen, not a lot, but I've seen it. And by the end of it, the guy didn't even realize that he is painting himself into a corner, and they pull that big stick out at the end of the knife out at the end and be like, well, you just said all this, and actually in a roundabout way, you kind of screwed yourself, sir. And they're just like,
So,
oh my, that to me is a trait of a fantastic lawyer where the person doesn't even know they're talking themselves into
right.
something, which
And
is scary, but what's that?
what you're describing is called the art of cross-examination, and it really is an
Yeah.
art. And it's an art that people who are in this industry need to have. And the idea is to lull the person to a real false sense of security, like, oh, you and I were best friends, I could tell you anything you want to hear. And also, besides that, you made me into such a great person. Yes, you're very smart, you read everything, you're intelligent, you got good grades, you understand everything. You certainly wouldn't sign a document blind, no, so on and so forth. And bam, you put a document in front of them that they sign that destroys their entire case.
Yeah, it destroys their credibility in one question.
Right, right.
Yeah. Any notable cases over the years that are just so ridiculous or laughable that stand out to you, or how the heck did you get in trouble for this kind of thing? Or are most of them pretty actually deserve to be in court?
Well, no, it's very interesting you said that. So I have two particular cases that I'm extremely proud of.
Hmm.
One was an elderly woman. When I say elderly, I'm talking in her late 80s. All right,
Hmm.
who was arrested 6 a.m. dawn raid at her house by Secret Service agents for bank robbery.
Hmm.
Okay, so this 85 plus woman they're accusing of bank robbery. I thought it was like, wow, like where did that come from? Went down. I met the client. The client says, I have no idea what they're talking about. I definitely go to that bank. I use that bank, but I never would rob a bank. My money's at that bank. I don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Speak to the Secret Service agents. Speak to the prosecutor. And here's the story. This woman, they're saying, walked into the bank and passed a note, and the note said, put all the money in a bag, seal the bag, and I'm leaving. And we have the note, and I'm going to give you a copy of the note. And your client wrote this note and went ahead and did this. And we have it, we have it on video. And again, the videos weren't that great back then. And we have it on video, and this is your client. Let me see the video. Video, may not be my client. It wasn't very hard. You couldn't see, you only see the top of the head on these videos.
Hmm.
So I went ahead and I did a couple of things. The first thing I did was I had my client write what's called a handwriting exemplar. I had her write out what was written on the note, and the note was written in English, and she really didn't write English that well. So it was kind of
Mm.
shocking that they thought my client wrote it, because that was the first thing. It's like, my client doesn't speak English that well and doesn't write English, and naturally she writes in Spanish. She never really would naturally write in Hebrew. I'm sorry, in Spanish. She would not naturally write in English.
Mm-hmm.
She naturally writes in Spanish, so it was kind of difficult even for her to write the exemplar for me. But I had to write it out. I had to write a couple of words, and I brought it to a handwriting expert. And the handwriting expert told me beyond a shadow of that, there's no way that this whoever wrote this note wrote these exemplars. It's not the same person. The handwriting does not match at all. Step number one.
Mm-hmm.
Went back to the U.S. attorney and said, "Look, it's not the handwriting." So they said, "Okay, well maybe somebody else wrote the note and she brought it into the bank." I'm like, "Okay, great." So I went back and I looked at the videos over and over and over again. And sure enough, in one of the videos, I noticed from one of the angles that there were two Brinks drivers walking into the bank when this person they were accusing is walking out of the bank. I said, let me go find those two Brinks drivers. Maybe they remember something. I contacted Brinks. I found out who the two drivers were at the time. They're both retired New York City police officers who, by the way, are trained in identification. They're trained in how to
Mm-hmm.
identify people. And I went ahead with a picture of my client, and I went ahead with this little video footage as well. And I said, guys, I need to talk to you. Do you remember this happening when somebody walked out of the bank, walked right by you, and was accused of bank robbery? And they both said, yes, we remember. We were both in the bank at that time, and they saw the video, and they said, yeah. So I said, well, let me show you a picture of who they think did it. And I showed them a picture of my client, and they both said, it's not her. I was like, how do you know? They're like, we're trained in identification of people. And they pointed out like 7 different things. There's 7 different facial features of my client. They said that the person who ever walked out of the bank did not have those facial features.
Mm-hmm.
With that evidence, now the U.S. attorney was ready to talk to me and say, okay, we'll dismiss the case.
Mm-hmm.
Never went to a grand jury, so that was very good. It wasn't indicted, and she went free, which is what the result should have been.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a great win on my part. I have a lot of work to get to that stage, but I was very happy about it. Now, I couldn't get the government to fix our door after they broke it down when they walked, when they busted open at 6:00 in the morning. But okay, that's another case.
Mm-hmm. Seems like that's how it goes.
Right.
So
Right.
how long did this port? Go ahead.
This took about 6 weeks to get all done, but at least for
And
6
she was
weeks.
incarcerated?
No, she was out on
Okay,
$200,000 bail though. The family had to come up with $200,000 to keep her out.
yeah.
Yeah.
So bail, it's just they hold it as security. They don't actually have to end up giving the money if she's
Right.
unless she violates bail.
Exactly.
But still, I mean, that's a lot of money for a lot of people to have to come up with and prove that you have. So this poor woman.
It was a terrible, terrible 6 weeks for her, no question about it. And it was a very active 6 weeks for me because I really concentrated on making sure that this woman goes free.
Yeah. Well, no kidding. I mean, and Secret Service kicking down your door. I mean, come on.
Right.
It's a little bit of an overstep. So when it comes to the science of the courtroom, the fingerprints, the bullets in the barrel and the signature testing, do you have strong faith in all of that science being 100% legitimate, or like the bite marks and things like that? Or is some of that in your mind junk science in your experience?
I wouldn't call it junk science. I call it opinion science, because the government's going to have one opinion, but I'll find an expert with the opposite opinion most of the time. So, it's not necessarily junk science, but it's more of an opinion science. I had one case I defended based on the handprint marks on the victim's arm. The victim testified that she was lifted up over my client's head and then thrown against the wall. And if you look at the marks on her arms, it would appear when I looked at it that her right hand made the mark on her left hand and her left hand made the mark on her right arm. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I had pictures of this. I blew up the pictures. I brought it over to my expert, and he's like, yes, so you're right. That's how it happened. There's no question about it. So unless your client switched his hand to pick somebody up, that's not what the evidence is showing. So that was an interesting win also on that expert testimony. And it was one of the few times, and I rarely do this. I rarely talk to a jury afterwards, but I spent so much money on this expert. And I got somebody who's top in his field. I wanted to understand, was this like the spoken about in the jury room? Was this the key piece of evidence that convinced you all? So I went to the jury afterwards, after I got my not guilty verdict, and I said, "Can I ask you guys a question? Like, did you think that my expert was so fantastic? Did you notice also the mark on the arms?" And they're like, "No, no, that's not what convinced us." I'm
Hmm.
like, "Oh my gosh, then what convinced you?" So Sky says, he says, "I'm a fisherman." I'm like, "You're a fisherman, yeah?" He says, "And I go tuna fishing." I said, "Yeah." He says, "And sometimes you're pulling out 100-pound tuna. It's very hard to get your arms like this. It's not such an easy thing to do." So when she testified that he was able to pick her up, I knew that I saw your client. There's no way he could pick her up. He's not
Yeah.
strong enough to do it.
Yeah.
You have to have a certain amount of strength to even do that. And that's when I stopped believing her. It's
Yeah.
interesting that something that a juror picked up is not even something that I even thought about at the time. I was looking at the
Yeah.
science of it, and he's looking at, gee, I just don't think he's strong enough to pick up the person.
I mean, that just makes me think, as a lawyer, don't make him try to pick up a dummy of her weight, because that's just putting on the glove again. Because
Right,
he might be,
exactly.
you don't,
Right.
you're probably in your head like, yeah, the guy probably couldn't lift her, but maybe he had a big breakfast and he's feeling tough this morning. I better not push my luck
Right.
there.
The adrenaline was flowing at that point, and he was able to find that strength.
Yeah, a crime of passion.
Hmm.
Um, in your experience, have you dealt with, I guess, elements of organized crime over the years?
Yeah. Yeah.
What is that life like in New York? Do you think it's still alive and strong, or is it not like the days when the mob was running everything? Or do you know?
Well, the days when the mob was ordering everything, they would use brute strength and guns.
Hmm.
Organized crime is still going on, but they're using computers and smartphones.
Hmm.
So it's a lot different these days. Um, People aren't paying protection money to to mobsters. They're paying protection money to cyber piracy attackers.
Yeah.
And it's just an interesting way that everything shifted to more of a technological life instead of a brute force life. But it still
So
exists.
do you have an example of someone that would do that? Pay these black market security piracy computer nerds, I guess. Just basically try to either incriminate them or get them off. How does that work?
Well, somebody would break into somebody's computer, hack into someone's computer, and basically say, if you don't pay me X amount of money, you'll never be able to get
Right.
into your computer again.
Or
Um,
take pictures or start your camera without you knowing it. Do you see a lot of those cases?
I do see those cases.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot of blackmail cases that come by my desk. We were watching you while you were watching porn, and here's what we saw.
Hmm.
If you don't want your whole family seeing it, give us X amount of Bitcoin.
So how do you go after those guys? Do they cover their tracks pretty good, or have you had success in actually finding people behind those?
So I've had 100% success in all those cases, and
Wow.
this podcast is not the forum to let the world know how I do it.
Good. But those people out there that are worried about it, call a good lawyer. And there are methods out there to catch these people.
100%,
Man, if
yes.
I could catch everybody that sends me an email, junk email, phishing to my inbox for
Right,
15 a day, I guess.
right,
Yeah, I
right.
always wondered at how well you can actually cover yourself digitally, because it just seems like, if you're a number one suspect in the world, the CIA is going to track you down on a computer somehow, no matter how well you think you're protected.
Definitely.
And then on the flip side of that, you think that the NSA is watching everything you do on your phone. So what the hell? Just be careful, I guess. But that's be a big part of what you do now. So the organized crime is there, just in a different form of an element. But obviously the mafia is still out there, probably selling drugs and things like that, and
Um,
human trafficking and whatever else is going on.
yeah, yeah. Human trafficking is a huge problem. Not so much in the New York area. It's more, out west and southern states. You'll see a lot of arrests going on there. In New York, in terms of what we call the mob, so it is drugs. They're still controlling a lot of the drug crimes that are going on here. It is the cyber crimes that are going on here. There's a great line in one of the Godfather movies: "I can steal more money with a briefcase than I can with a gun."
Mm-hmm.
And we've developed to the stage where you can steal more money with a briefcase than you can with a gun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is Bitcoin still a safe method of payment for these black market exchanges? Untraceable currency?
They think so, but the government has figured out how to trace this stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I wondered how long that was going to take because you hear about the Silk Road and all these things where people can go buy guns and whatever they want
right.
using Bitcoin and think they're getting away scot-free. So, and I think there was a lot of organized crime using that as a payment method early on, and that's
Yes,
pretty much really starting to fizzle out as people get caught.
right, right. People are going to get
Yeah.
caught. It's going to be easier to catch them. People also think that their WhatsApp messages are safe and their Kick messages are safe, and everything they're doing on their phones in terms of private messaging is all safe. None of that is safe. The government could see all that, find it all. A subpoena to WhatsApp is going to reveal every picture you ever received, sent,
Hmm.
every message you ever received or sent.
Signal and things like that too, same story.
100%.
So, is that because it's a warrant to your phone, or they can contact the company
They
itself and
can
get
they
that data?
contact I mean, they can set if they certainly if they have the phone, they could have a search warrant for your phone. That's easy. That's the easiest thing to do.
That's easy.
But if they don't have the phone, they're going to send a search warrant to Signal and to WhatsApp and to Kick and to all the
Yeah.
other people out there.
So now
And
when
they,
you sit down with somebody, I guess it largely depends on the case. What's your approach to questioning your client in terms of what evidence could be held against them? You're probably like, do you have a video doorbell? Do you have Alexa in the home? You're probably going through a laundry list of technology now.
yes, yeah, I get a full story, and then I get another full story, and hopefully I get the truth.
Yeah.
Um, but the tell me everything doesn't work. You have to go through the laundry list. Definitely go through
Yeah.
the laundry list. Every computer you ever signed into, every service you ever used, every email address you ever used, every phone that you ever used, every messaging service you ever used. We need to go over all of it. I
Mm.
recently had such an interesting case. It was about a document that my client knew for sure was forged. And the reason he knew it was forged is because, first of all, he didn't sign it. That's the easiest way to know. But like, how do you prove it's not forged? He said, well, how did the other person get it? I went through all of my emails. I never sent it to him. I never sent it to him on email. So, how'd the person get it? So finally, the big reveal, he says, I got it from Skype. Remember Skype?
Mm.
Skype was years ago.
Hmm.
There's no more Skype now. And
Okay.
he thought that if I say Skype, they'll never be able to prove me wrong because there's no more Skype. What he didn't count on is the fact that until tomorrow, I think, because we're now on December 30th, January 1st, Skype will go away for good.
Hmm.
Microsoft has every Skype message that anyone has ever sent. They preserved it. So my client, who said it's a forgery, went to his Microsoft Skype and downloaded every message he ever sent, and sure enough, it's not there. When we told the other side to do it, the guy who was the forger said, you go ahead and download your side. He says, I can't, I don't know how. So, okay, we'll have an expert, walk you through it. No, it doesn't work for me. So obviously it was a forgery. He thought he was going to get away with it because Skype is going away, but he
Yeah.
screwed up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a defense attorney on your site, or I think I've seen a video of you, and it's, there's a lot of things that police use right from when they approach the car or pull somebody in for questioning, a lot of techniques to start shaping the case, presumably if you're guilty, right out of the gate. So what's your advice to somebody, I guess, guilty or innocent, it's unproven yet? How, is it just call an attorney immediately and shut your damn mouth?
That's my advice. Shut up and call Saul. Instead of better call
Call
Saul,
Saul.
it's shut up and call Saul.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, did they make the show about you?
No, they didn't. It's everyone thinks that, well, I'm innocent or I'm smart enough, I'm smarter than the police, I'm smarter than the government, I'm going to be able to talk my way out of it. No one has
Hmm.
ever talked their way out of it. I guarantee you that doesn't work that way. Okay.
Hmm.
The police are not interested in hearing your innocent story. They're there to trick you, to get you to say something that proves you're guilty. And even if you don't say anything that proves you're guilty, whatever you're saying is they're going to be using against you. We
Hmm.
say you have the right to remain silent. I say use the right. We say anything you say can and will be used against you. It will be used against you. Stop talking. Don't say a word. The only thing
Yeah.
anyone should ever say is, I want my attorney here. I want an attorney. Because once you ask for an attorney, like I said before, all questioning stops.
Hmm. Now you have a very high success rate in defending your clients, so I imagine the answer is no. But have you ever tried to defend somebody, lost, and they were innocent in your mind and sent to jail? Have you
No,
ever experienced that personally?
no,
No.
thank God, no, because that is the
Yeah.
scary. Someone people would say to me, well, what's the hardest, client to defend? Is it a child rapist? Is it, sex crime? Is it, a murderer. What's the hardest? And I said, you want to know what the hardest? The hardest is the innocent client. When I'm
Mm-hmm.
defending somebody that I know in my gut is innocent, I don't sleep at night. I have to win that case. And I've
Mm-hmm.
had several innocent clients, and thank God I won all those cases, because it's the most frustrating thing to say that your client is being accused of this terrible crime, whatever it is, and he's totally
Mm-hmm.
innocent. I don't sleep. I need to prove his innocence, and it never works that way. It always has to be that the government has to prove guilt. I don't have to prove innocence. But when I have an innocent client, I know that my job is to prove their innocence and to make it stick forever.
Mm-hmm. It's probably not a large percentage as people would think by watching the TV, but what percentage of your clients would you say are in fact innocent that you defend?
It's hard to say. Probably about 10%.
Yeah, so it's if you're in the building, you're probably a part of something anyway. You're not just that little old lady that went to go pick up some cash the one day.
Right. I mean, there are certainly levels of innocence. I'm part of the
Yeah.
conspiracy, but I'm just the driver type of thing. Like, okay, but you're still part of the conspiracy.
Yeah, guilty by association, things
Yeah.
like that. Any advice for anybody else out there? Anything you want to touch on?
Basically, when the police want to question you, when law enforcement want to question you, don't think you're
Mm-hmm.
smarter than them. Get a lawyer. Speak with a lawyer
Mm-hmm.
first, then make the determination whether you're going to speak to law enforcement or not. Um,
Mm-hmm.
as a blanket rule, I usually tell people not to speak to law enforcement, have their attorney do it. Usually works much better for them. There are times where I bring people into the U.S. Attorney's office because my client is innocent and I want them to hear what's called an
Mm-hmm.
innocence proffer. And I also want to get more educated about the case from the U.S. Attorney. So I will bring in people on an innocence proffer. I've had people who I believe are 100% innocent testify in front of the grand jury, and it has worked out for me, even though most attorneys will say, oh, we never want to put our client into the grand jury because you're going to be locked
Mm-hmm.
into a story. Well, if my story is innocence, I want to be locked into an innocent story. And
Mm-hmm.
I've gotten what's called a no true bill in grand juries, where basically the grand jury says, we're not going to go ahead and indict this case,
Mm-hmm.
on some serious charges, on rape charges. I've gotten no true bills. So I've had success there. But the bottom line is always speak to an attorney. Don't speak to law enforcement first.
So if the county decides to prosecute and say it's somebody who can't afford an attorney and they get an attorney appointed for them, does that drop their chances? Are you getting a low quality attorney, or is that just a myth? You could still get a very good attorney that's going to do a good job in defending you, or is that just, sorry, bud, I wish you the best?
You could get an attorney much better than me. Problem is that attorney is going to have 1,000 cases a year, whereas I may only have 100 cases a year. So I
Mm-hmm.
could concentrate more on each case, whereas the free attorney, so to speak, has just too many. His caseload is too high, and there's only 24 hours in a day. What do you expect him or her to do? That's the only difference. But in terms of brains, there are people much smarter than me who work for legal aid and public
Mm-hmm.
defenders.
So do you think that those lawyers that have a high caseload and they're appointed, are they more prone to trying to work out a plea?
No, I don't think that anyone's selling out their client for a plea. I don't think
Mm-hmm.
they're more prone to it. I just think when it comes down to it, that they need to have you have to have more public defenders because we have to
Yeah.
spread the caseload out more. That's the problem.
Yeah. And you've never been on the defense side of being an appointed lawyer in your early days.
I have. When I first started
Okay.
out, I did that work. Yes, I did that work in Nassau
And,
County.
and what was your experience there? Just exactly what you said, a little bit overloaded, a little tough to do a really thorough job, or?
Well, one of the benefits of doing it in Nassau County is you could actually say no every once in a while. So
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't take more than 5-6 cases a week,
Mm-hmm.
for that very reason.
Yeah.
I rather give higher quality service to each client than to have an overwhelming amount of clients and not be able to give them as much quality service.
Mm-hmm. So people watching, should they still have faith in the American court system, or and turn off CNN? What's your opinion there?
I recently watched a movie on Netflix called Richard Jewell. It's about the guy who was accused of the Atlanta bombing. It's a great movie. I
Mm-hmm.
don't want to recommend movies on your podcast, but it was a great movie. But it shows
Good, yeah.
how the system could really fail somebody, and it's unfortunate. But again, a great lawyer could change everything around. So the system does work most of the time. And when it doesn't work, it does get magnified that it's not working. So that's also a benefit, that it's getting magnified that it's not working, because we could learn from our mistakes, and the government does learn from their mistakes. And I don't think there'll ever be a case like Richard Jewell again. I think the government learns from their mistakes, and and will do a better investigation next time something needs to be investigated a little bit more carefully.
So people watching that maybe are going to get up to no good this New Year's Eve, and they get in trouble. How do they get a hold of you? Do you have any social media or
Yes.
anything besides?
So you could always go to my website. It's bienenfeldlaw.com, bienenfeldlaw.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram at Bienenfeld Law. And just call my office, send me an email. I'll be happy to talk to you.
Okay. Well, I really appreciate you come on. Very interesting.
Thanks.
And thank you for your time. I'm sure you're busy. So, and a happy New Year to you.
Happy New Year. Yes. Looking forward.
Yeah. And hopefully you have a good 2026. Thank you.
You too. Thanks so much.